covering all your latest sports news, trades, scores, signings, all here on Sports Talk Live with Alex Pat on WCGR 88.5 FM, The Underground. And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sports Talk Live with Alex Pat. I'm your host, Alex Pat, and today is going to be talking about something very exciting, something a lot of us have been waiting for a long time. It is officially spring training, and that means getting ready for another year of baseball, particularly my team, the Chicago Cubs. This year is probably the most hyped Cubs season in almost ever. When you think about it, when you look at what this team has, what this team did last year, and the promise that it has shown, there is so much to be excited for. I'm more excited about the season than 08, more excited about the season than 04, which was a huge letdown after 03. But this is going to be something. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the projected lineups, what we have this year that we had last year and what we got this year to add to the team. And we're going to have some good discussions about what to expect, what the realistic windows are for this team, and, you know, just kind of looking at everything as all the pitchers and catchers have reported. And a lot of the players, including Kyle Schwarber, Kris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, all reported a week or so early so they could, get started on outfield drills, hitting drills. So it's really good to see that not only the fans are hyped up for this season, but so are the players. And when you have that overall positive attitude, that adds so much to everything. And we can only imagine that our great skipper Joe Maddon is thrilled about that too. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about what could be the most feared lineup in the National League. Two huge additions to this lineup this year were the super utility man, Ben Zobrist, who I've been a fan for a long time, and I've always dreamed of Ben Zobrist coming to the Cubs, and that's a reality. And outfielder Jason Heyward, who was an absolute Cubs killer his, still short career. He's only 26 years old, and in his 4 years with Atlanta and 1 year with the Cardinals, he was a Cub killer, but seeing him now killing it, hopefully for the Cubs, is going to be awesome. There's a lot of stats you could talk about in a lineup. I picked out some pretty key ones. We're going to start off with wins above replacement, and I know there's a lot of controversy over wins above replacement, but when you look at modern day baseball, you look at the way teams are built, the way teams play, the way they're put together, wins above replacement has become more and more of a valuable stat. Followed by a stat that's probably more valuable than average these days. That's on base percentage. Again, getting on base. This is advanced metrics. You got to combine a lot of that stuff. We are going to bring up home runs because the Cubs are a pretty big home run hitting team in the playoffs in the regular season last year. So it is still, a pretty big stat. And then lastly, we'll look at batting average. There's a lot of others you could put in here. OPS, offensive WAR as well as defensive WAR separately, but we're going to look at overall WAR for these players. So, first of all, the projected starting lineup, and this is just a projection. The order can be different, and obviously there are going to be days where guys are resting, where you guys have the bench in, but this is what I think the Cubs lineup is going to look like on opening day, coming up on April 6th, I believe. So leading off, I think Jason Heyward would be the good place to put him, followed by Ben Zobrist at number 2. Now, Heyward 1, Ben Zobrist 2, I think you're going to see that fluctuate a little bit. I think there'll be days you'll see Ben Zobrist leading off. There'll be days you'll be seeing Jason Heyward leading off. I personally think Jason Heyward leading off, for the most part, would be the good choice because of the way he could run. But you really can't go wrong with either of these guys. And then batting third, who bats third quite often, is Anthony Rizzo. And then fourth, you'll have Kris Bryant. At number 5, Jorge Soler. I think you could put Kyle Schwarber at number 6. He was batting 2 a lot last year, but the additions of Heyward and Zobrist, you're going to have to adjust them in the lineup a little bit. At 7, Miguel Montero, who will probably be catching. And we mentioned Kyle Schwarber before. He'll be in left field, assumingly. Now, he was working a bit on catching, because that's what he was drafted as. However, we have so many catchers on this roster, and we need to put Kyle Schwarber somewhere. He's way too valuable of a bat to keep out of the lineup. So left field 6 for Kyle Schwarber, and Montero in the 7th spot catching. And then this is a Joe Madden team, so the pitcher is going to bat 8th. And then the 9th spot, you'll have Addison Russell. And when you have Addison Russell as your number 9 hitter, that's saying what a pretty good lineup you have. And then on the bench, you'll have guys fluctuating between Iowa and the Major League team. But your solid core bench should consist of Javier Baez, who is on his way to turning into a super utility man. He's been playing center field in the offseason in the Arizona League. So that's good to have. Also, you also have to remember that Javier Baez, as good as he is, I think there's a good chance that he could be traded for a piece in the future. But for the sake of right now, he's still on the team. He'll be there. He'll play in some games. He'll probably learn a lot under Ben Zobrist as being this, big utility guy. You also have Tommy La Stella, who played last year with the Cubs. We got him in a trade. We traded Vizcaino for him. He was a pitcher. Pretty sure he's been caught with PEDs, so, whatever. And then you have one of my favorites in Chris Coghlan. We still have him, and Chris Coghlan is a very valuable bat. Last year, his OBP was 341, and he was a very solid defensive outfielder, and having him on the bench and plugging him in to outfield spots, that's great to have. And then you'll have Matt Caesar, who's again, up and down between Iowa and the big league team. And then you'll have his final year playing in the big leagues, catcher David Ross. He's a great guy to have as a veteran leader. He's a great guy to help coach the pitching staff and some of the other young guys. And he's still a great catcher. His bat night might not be there as much as it once was, just because with his age, but he can still sling it to the bases. He could still block well. I mean, he's picked off a couple guys. Remember when he picked off in Washington end the game? I can't remember who he picked off, but it had that great gift of him reacting. So that was pretty fun. Those are the projected lineups, and I think we could go through this lineup and kind of look at the key stats. Now, 1 through 9 on this projected starting lineup. So Hayward, Zobrist, Rizzo, Bryant, Soler, Schwarber, Montero, and Russell. That's 8 spots out of the 9. We're not going to count the pitcher spot. We're going to look at the stats from last year, and everyone but Jorge Soler had a plus WAR. The highest WAR last year was Jason Hayward, who was a Cardinal last year, of a 6.5. Anthony Rizzo last year had a WAR of 6.2, and Chris Bryant had a WAR of 5.9. Now, with Jorge Soler, it's a negative 0.1, but you got to keep in mind he played 101 games. He was injured a lot of the time, but he still batted .262, hit 10 home runs, and had an on-base percentage of .324. So he's got to work on getting the walks. The on-base percentage is a little low. We've seen his patience kind of grow without the season. Early in the season when he played, he was swinging and missing and striking out a lot. He got hurt for a while, but he came back and really improved. Now, if you look at what he did in the postseason, his on-base percentage in the postseason, along with 3 home runs, was .600. In the Cardinal series and the Division series, his first 2 games, he got on base like every time, whether it was a hit, a home run, or a walk. I mean, he was on fire in that series. And as much as the Cubs offense struggled in the Mets series, he was one of the few bright spots on the offense. Now, let's go down and look at the on-base percentages. Jason Hayward, he's known for getting on base. Leadoff guy, .359. Ben Zobrist, .364. Anthony Rizzo, .387. Chris Bryant, who batted .275 and did strike out almost 200 times, still drew a lot of walks and was a .369 on-base percentage in almost a full season, and minus the 2 weeks he was down in Iowa. So he had a great eye at the plate, and you saw him over and over turn counts from 0-2 to 3-2. And that 3-2 count, heck, he could send one flying, get a base hit, or walk. But when you have the ability to turn an 0-2 count into a full count, that is huge. Making the pitcher work is one of the keys to a good offense. And last year, this young Cub offense wore pitchers out. And they did it all year. But a great example that I always give was in that 4-game sweep against the San Francisco Giants. They wore out Jake Peavy. They wore out Heston. They wore out Kane. It means everything these days. And right now, this Chicago Cubs lineup is an advanced metric wonder. I mentioned Jorge Soler, 324, coming around near the end. Kyle Schwarber, 355. Drew's walks as well, pretty good. Montero, 345, pretty solid. And Addison Russell, 307, who started off light hitting, but really came into his own towards the end. And Addison Russell, when you look at his value, he's going to be a great hitter if he keeps continuing this. But you look at his glove, he's a future Gold Glove in the making, and I'm confident that even by this coming season, he could win a Gold Glove. If you've seen what he's done with the glove, it's pretty spectacular. Now that we touch on the subject of home runs are going to be plentiful for the Cubs. And though you look a lot at the advanced metrics, you can't rule out home runs. They are an important stat. Last year, you had your 30-plus home run hitter in Anthony Rizzo. Chris Bryant hit 26. I think this year he could reach the 30-plus mark. Jorge Soler, when he plays, he could just crush the ball, and he has the potential of a 30-homer season in the future. Again, he's very young. He's going to keep building, but he's got the potential. Kyle Schwarber? He had 16 home runs in 69 games last year, and 5 in 9 postseason games. So overall, he hit 21 home runs in under 80 games, and he's 22 years old. Not only were those home runs, I mean, we saw how he hit the ball. I mean, you could almost see a vapor trail after he hit them. He has the potential of being one of the best sluggers in the National League. His power is unreal. And I think this year, playing a full season, I could project him hitting about 25 to 30. And then we go to the 7th. Montero hit 15 home runs. He averages about 12, 15 a year. If he could, keep around that spot, that'd be pretty good. And Addison Russell, he hit 13. A young kid, 22 years old, hit 13. This year, I could see him hitting, 15 to 20. Now, the one who's going to be in the starting lineup not hitting home runs, obviously, is going to be Ben Zobrist. Pure on-base guy, doesn't worry about power. Batted 284 last year. He hit 7 home runs last year. Probably, 5, 8 at the most this year. And Jason Hayward, when he came up with the Braves, he always had the potential of 20-plus home runs. And I think that we don't have to worry much about home runs with him. He hit 13 last year. If he hits like 15, but he does his job by getting on base and grinding out at bats, putting the ball in play, that's perfectly fine. I think if you have any 35-plus home run hitters on this team, you look at Rizzo and Bryant and Schwarber with that. So there's a lot of potential there for the power in the middle of the lineup. And you got to let the rest of your guys, sure, they'll hit home runs, but getting on base. And same with the home run hitters. It goes to show that getting on base and hitting home runs, it's all key there. So it's a pretty good looking lineup right now, I got to say. Everything balances out well. You can't just look at batting average. You can't just look at home runs. You got to look at all the things they're doing, even the smallest things like pitches per at bat and offensive, defensive, and overall WAR. So that's what you got for batting. And also a little side note, Javier Baez, after striking out a ridiculous amount of times in a few games in 2014, still hit a lot of power, still hit home runs. Last year, he only played in 28 games because of injury, but he hit 289 and 325 on base percentage. So it shows he's shortening up his swing a little bit, and he only hit 1 regular season home run, where in that stretch in 2014, he was hitting more home runs, but not hitting for hits a lot, striking out more. So that's good to see. Now, we go to the all-important pitching rotation. We added some arms. I was honestly hoping we'd add 1 or 2 more, but I think that we're still looking pretty solid so far. So we're going to start with the pitching rotation. 1 through 5. Your number 1 ace is so unbelievably obvious. Cy Young winner Jake Arrieta, who last year had over 20 wins and a 1.77 ERA, which is historical proportions. Now, will he have a 1.7 ERA this coming year? No. I could see his ERA being about 2.2 to 2.4. If he does that, that's fine. That's still really good too. Let's face it. And then we got Jon Lester at number 2. Last year at a 3.34 ERA. Pretty good overall. Didn't get a lot of run support. Also, I think he's looking to bounce back a little bit. He got roughed up in a good amount of outings. And, we want to see him win the big games again. I just didn't think you saw as much of that last year. But we know Jon Lester's track record. He can easily do that. I'm not worried about him. I'm confident that he'll be back on the saddle again and ready to really win some big games for the Cubs this coming year. Now, number 3 is who we acquired this year in free agency, the hot-headed John Lackey. Last year with the Cardinals, he had a career 2.77 ERA. He was pretty good last year. We saw what he did to us in Game 1. Not quite so in Game 4, but John Lackey, he's a veteran. He's won World Series, and he's the kind of guy where in the regular season, he's, middle of the road, but when you put him in a big situation like the postseason, he plays with fire, and kind of like Jon Lester, one of those guys who you want in a postseason game. Even at his age, signed for 2 years, he's good to have on the team. And sometimes that firepower is kind of what you want on a postseason team. So I'm happy that we got John Lackey on there. Now, Jason Hammel, he's an interesting one. Throughout his career, he has been a great first half pitcher. Last year, first half, 286. He was good in the first half. But as the record always shows, the second half, he always falls off the wagon. And second half last year was 510. Now, I put him at the 4 spot because he is a veteran, and we still have him. So he'll be working, as a veteran with, some of the other younger pitchers coming up, which we have more in the bullpen than, say, in the rotation. But it is still good to have that kind of veteran presence there. And he can be a really good pitcher. He just has to play consistently through the year. And then at the 5 spot, we'll have Kyle Hendricks, who 3.95 ERA last year was inconsistent, but he does show some promise. Some Greg Maddux-like changing of speeds and pitching on the corners. So that I think could be the potential opening week rotation. Obviously, when we get to our bullpen, we'll talk about this more, but you'll have, some sub starts in there. Now, our bullpen, for the longest time, the Cubs bullpen has been known for being pure garbage. Last year, the bullpen was what helped carry the Cubs to the NLCS. There were some short outings by the starters, whether it was Hendricks, who doesn't really go far to begin with, Jason Hammel, and our bullpen came in and stepped up. One of the main reasons is because a lot of the middle relievers we have on here can also plug in to start every now and then. And I was at a game against the Cardinals last year where it was called Bullpen Day, where our long relievers came in and we won the game. You look at the back end of our bullpen, who are kind of the long relief guys, the ones who could start as well if you need to plug them into. Trevor Cahill was great out of the bullpen. Travis Wood, we've seen him start for the Cubs. He's one of the longest members on this team. I mean, he's one of the few who's been around for more than a few years, and we've seen his inconsistencies at starter, but when he's in the bullpen, he's good, and he could pitch multiple innings. And if you need to plug him in for a start or two, you can do that with him. Also, one of my favorites from last year was Clayton Richard. I kept saying last year, bring him back this year. His value in the bullpen and plugging in for a start if you need to, it's big for a team. In this day and age, I'm going to keep saying that when starters don't pitch all these complete games, when you need some long relief, when you need to plug in guys here or there, having these long relief guys is huge for this kind of team. Now we'll also look at the other aspects of the bullpen. Carl Edwards, prospect. We saw him a little bit at the end of last year. Looked promising. We'll probably see him more later in the innings. Hopefully get some good work in there. The guy we traded Starlin Castro for, Adam Warren, right-hander from the Yankees, he's got some promise. We'll also take a second right now to thank Starlin Castro for what he did, and we will miss him. Even though there were some thick and thin times, he always had a star, pun intended, attitude, and good luck with the Yankees. It does stink to see you go. But yeah, Adam Warren, he's got some promise. Neil Ramirez, unleash the beast. When he is healthy, he is good. But he was battling injury last year. But man, when he was on, he was on. And they say he's got the potential to be a starter one day. For now, he's in the bullpen, and I think that's where he will be for this year. And then you got Justin Grimm, another bright spot in that pen from last year. The Grim Reaper, as we call him. So he's looking good there. Then we go to our setup guy, Pedro Strop, who, though had some inconsistencies overall, again, when he was on, look out. Strike out 3 guys in a row, look good. Really, a lot of promise for Strop. Again, yeah, he does have some very rough patches, very, very rough patches, but he's continuing to grow, continuing to learn, and I think he is setting up himself for a good season. And then a closer, one of the most underrated closers you don't hear about was Hector Rondon last year. His ERA, 1.67. He had 30 out of 34 saves last year. That was among, some of the best in the National League. We saw him close out Game 4 of the Division Series. Only let one guy on base in that. I mean, he's a good closer, and I'm very happy with him. So if he continues to do what he does, he'll be one of the better closers in the National League. So, looking at this team as a whole, it's going to be around for a while. It's not like, they're assembling this team for 1 year, then they're going to blow it up. No, Theo Epstein is building a team to contend for the next decade. Not 1 year, not 2 years. So, we're going to have these guys for more than just next year. You're going to see some subtractions. You're going to see some additions. But the core with Rizzo, Bryant, Hayward, Schwarber, Russell, Arrieta, that's going to be there. That's going to be the one that's finally going to win it all. And as I've said, and as many other Cubs fans have said, within the next decade, with this team, with this scheme, if they don't win a World Series, they're never winning. Never. I guarantee it. But let's hope that we don't have to worry about that, and this core will get it done finally. There is so much to look forward to, and there is going to be so much more to see, and more things will develop with this team. But before we sign off, a few things I would like to mention. We didn't see a lot of subtractions this year, but we did see 2 big ones in the lineup, but the additions kind of outweigh the subtractions. We lost Dexter Fowler, center fielder, who was really good for the Cubs last year. Career high 17 home runs. Though he had a .250 batting average, he got on base in the key moments and was a good fielder. It's pretty obvious he's not coming back, but we have Jason Hayward. And like I said, losing Starlin Castro, it does stink, but we have the super utility man, Ben Zobrist. So it's exciting, folks, and we are hopefully in for what's going to be a fantastic season like the one that won 97 games last year. So we will continue more Cubs stories later as things develop. We'll make sure we're all ready for opening day on the show. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Sports Talk Live with Alex Pat on WCGR 88.5 FM, The Underground.